Welcome, Bronco Nation, to my preview of all the Boise alumni in the NFL fighting for roster spots this season. I'm also going to be previewing which teams you're going to want to watch this preseason to get the most Boise State alumni action. As always, I'm only going to be including Boise State players who finished their career at Boise State. So former Boise State players such as Ryan Finley, who actually isn't currently on an NFL team right now, but if he was, former current players such as Ryan Finley, I wouldn't be looking at because he finished his career at NC State, so he's more of a NC State alumni than a Boise State one. So I'm going to be looking at the 20 Boise State athletes out there who are Boise State alumni who are competing for roster spots. Some of them have them locked up, but we're going to look at every single one of them, see where they stand, see which games you're going to watch, what their probability of making that roster is, and how much playing time they're going to get during the preseason, so you know which games to tune in for to get that Boise State alumni action. Last year, 17 Boise State alumni played in the NFL at various capacities, but all of that number includes players who are on the active rosters at some point during the season. So outstanding job by the Boise State alumni last year, competing and performing well for their teams. And this year we got 20 competing for roster spots. So pretty much all the same from last year returning back. Of course, notably not returning is Jamar Taylor, who of course had that devastating leg injury last year and probably is going to be out long-term, potentially career-wise. But other than that, the rest of the Boise State players, I'm reviewing this list real quick here. Durant Miles is another player who is not currently on an active roster. ESPN lists him as under the Atlanta Falcons, but Atlanta Falcons don't have him on their roster. So with that being said, we're going to get into the Boise State players in the NFL this year. One more. Tyron Crawford. Tyron Crawford retired. Great former Boise State player and a great player at the defensive tackle position there, nose tackle position for the Cowboys, and he did an outstanding job, and he's finally retired. So congrats to him on an outstanding career. All right, let's jump right into the video then, shall we? All right, so we're going to start off here. I just did alphabetical order, AFC through the NFC. So starting off with the Cleveland Browns. Oh, one more thing in this video. I'm also going to be listing each team on a scale of 1 to 3. The scale of 1 to 3 will basically mean 1 is definitely go in and watch those teams play in the preseason. Going to be lots of Boise State alumni action, either because there's lots of teams on the roster or because there are Boise State players who are really competing for a slot and not guaranteed to be on the team, so they're going to get a lot of preseason action. 2 means there's some action, so you might tune in. This might mean first half, second half, might be able to tune in, and I'll talk about that in depth. And then 3 is going to be pretty much no action, either because it's a position group where you're not going to really be able to see very much, such as an offensive line position, or it's a position group, or it's a player who has locked up his roster spot, so you're not really going to see much. All right, so let's get into it then. Cleveland Browns, we have Curtis Weaver, defensive end, wearing number 59 this year. One more thing. I know I'm kind of backtracking here. I should have said all this up front. All of the information I got on these players comes from their team's website. So I got which players were on their teams based on the roster that each team website put out. So let's start off again then. Curtis Weaver, defensive end, number 59, playing in his second year. Missed his rookie season due to a foot injury. Of course, he was drafted by Miami in the 5th round. So claimed off of, once Miami released him, claimed by the Cleveland Browns. He looks like he might have a pretty good shot of making the roster this year, but he's also going to be competing for that spot. So I'm going to rate the Cleveland Browns as a number 2 overall watchability. Curtis Weaver, good player, great player at Boise State. Probably going to get some action in the first half there. So if you want to tune in the first half, see if you can catch any of Curtis Weaver guys wearing number 59. Cleveland Browns, that's the team. My bet is he makes that final 53-man roster because I think he would have had played for Miami last year if he hadn't hurt his foot. Tennessee Titans, the next team. Now I'm going to be rating them 1 overall because Jeremy McNichols is playing for the Tennessee Titans. He played last year, played in all 16 games, had his best year yet. After 5 years in the NFL, a lot of often on and off of the practice squads for different teams. Finally made a shot with the Tennessee Titans. 16 games played. He had 204 yards rushing, most obviously so far because this was the first time he'd really gotten chances to play. Not starting, but coming in behind Derek McHenry there. He got a chance to really come in some of the garbage time, but also as a change of pace back, got some real playing time. So 204 yards, averaged 4.3 yards per carry, had 1 touchdown, 259 yards total if you count his receiving yards. Uphill battle for roster spot. Not guaranteed. Again, had a pretty good year last year, but Titans brought in some other running backs. So an uphill battle for roster spot, which means you're going to get a lot of action from Jerry McNichols. potentially first and second half action for watching Tennessee Titans. So I definitely tune in. Going to get a lot of action. Of course, running back's an exciting position to watch. Denver Broncos, I'm going to be rating them 1 as well. Brett Rippon coming in his 3rd year, had his best year last year, getting to actually start a game versus the Jets where he had 242 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, of course, through those 3 interceptions, but he did get a win, which was big. Right now, it doesn't look like he's competing for first or second string. The Denver Broncos did bring in Teddy Bridgewater to compete with Drew Lock. So Rippon really looking at that 3rd string position, probably going to stay 3rd string, and I think he's going to make that 53-man roster. Looks like the Broncos might carry 3 quarterbacks again, especially with the injuries to Lock last year. Looks like even if he is 2nd string, they're still going to carry a quarterback in there at 3rd string there. But he could be on and off the practice squad throughout the year. My goal, my dream for Rippon would be to actually leave Denver and go to a team where they're going to let him actually compete for a starting position. I think Brett Rippon with a little bit more development is just that close to being a starting quarterback in the NFL. I really think that he could, if he had just the right development and the right team set. So Denver Broncos, though, you're going to get a lot of action from Brett Rippon. That they haven't announced a starter, and it is a really tight race between Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater. So probably most of the first half action is going to go to those 2 quarterbacks. But tuning in the second half, late in the second half, potentially 4th quarter, going to see a lot of Brett Rippon, I think. So definitely tune in there. And if Drew Lock ends up firming up that role and taking that first round, that number 1 slot as the first string quarterback, you could definitely see Rippon coming in as the number 2 back at that point. Because last year, of course, Denver brought in Blake Bortles and Jeff Driscoll to both compete for that 2nd string spot. When Drew Lock took the starting spot, they ended up releasing those guys. Or actually, Jeff Driscoll got injured, but Blake Bortles they ended up releasing once he wasn't able to compete for the first round because the veteran was just going to be a little bit more expensive than, say, a player like Brett Rippon, who they already have locked up on a contract, who's a cheap option there at 2nd string, who can also come in and play. So I think that if Drew Lock wins this starting match, this first string position, you could potentially see Rippon coming in again as a 2nd string for Denver Broncos. But again, number 1 watchability, especially in the second half there. I think that's a team you're going to want to tune in there late to watch some Brett Rippon action. Okay, Dallas Cowboys, or the Dallas Broncos, because of all the Boise State players that are always on their team. Of course, they're down 1 Boise player this year because of Tyron Crawford retiring, but they still have 4 Boise State players on their team. However, I'm only going to be rating them a number 2 watchable for this reason. DeMarcus Lawrence and Leighton Vander Esch are locked up starters. You're not going to be seeing them in the preseason. Had pretty good years last year. Lawrence had a better season than Vander Esch did because Vander Esch had some injuries, but they're both solid starters who are going to hoping to have a great year this year. So you're not going to see them much. That leaves Darian Thompson and Cedric Wilson, who are going to be wearing number 23 and number 1. Oh, and if I forgot to mention this, but McNichols wearing number 28 and Rippon number 4. Sorry. Anyhow, Dallas Cowboys, Darian Thompson wearing number 23 and Cedric Wilson wearing number 1. I think if you tune in early in these games, you're going to see certainly Cedric Wilson get a lot of playing time because he's really competing for kind of that 4th receiver slot there. His outlook's very promising. He's going to be behind Cooper, Lamb, and Gallup, but he is definitely looking at that 4th receiver slot. He's wearing number 1, which is a really good sign. He played well in the Hall of Fame game, which of course is the first preseason game of the year, with 2 catches for 29 yards. He was targeted 4 times, but the other 2 weren't really catchable balls, but he had some great catches there. For 1 on 3rd down for an 8-yard reception, and then he had a 21-yard reception, which was a great job there too. So I think if you tune in early for the 1st or 2nd drive, you're going to see some Cedric Wilson action. After that, Darian Thompson, you might see him throughout the game. He didn't. I'm not sure if he played. I couldn't catch him on the screen. I was looking. I didn't see him. He didn't record any stats in that Hall of Fame game. He has an uphill battle to get that safety spot, which of course he played well last year with 42 tackles and 1 interception, but he's competing against 10 other safeties. There's 10 safeties competing for those few safety spots on the Dallas team this year, so not a high likelihood potentially of probably not going to be a starter, and an uphill battle for a spot on that 53-man roster. So you might see him playing quite a bit, but I'm still going to be rating them number 2 overall because it's just uncertain how much playing time Darian Thompson is actually going to get, and Cedric Wilson will be out after the first 1 or 2 drives. Okay, so that brings us to New York Giants. We have David Moa, defensive tackle, number 96. He's in his 2nd season. I'm going to be rating them over number 3 overall. because you're probably not going to see too much of him playing. He has an uphill climb after getting cut by the Vikings last year and spending the second half of the season on the Giants practice squad. He has an uphill climb for a roster spot. I think he's good enough to make it, but just being the one player and being the defensive tackle position, you're probably not going to see too much, but definitely tune in if you want to see some more constrictor action there. Philadelphia Eagles, I'm going to rate them number 2 overall because John Hightower, wide receiver, number 82, it's his second season in. He had an okay year. He had 10 receptions for 167 yards, but he definitely was kind of just a long play threat. He dropped a lot of passes over the middle, a lot of short, medium completion passes, was not a reliable target, was actually left off of the team, even though he was still on that 53-man roster. He didn't travel with the team for several of the games due to certain personality conflict issues. So it seems like he's learned his lesson, whatever that was. I'm not in on what was going on there, but whatever they wanted him to learn, it seems like he's learned it. He's back in. He traveled the last few games of the season, and he has made some impressive catches in training camp. He probably needs to show a lot more to really lock up a firm slot spot on the team there, and I don't think he's going to be a starting receiver for the Eagles. But I think if he continues to develop, continues to show the prowess that he had at Boise State, and show that he can be more than just a deep threat, which of course at Boise State he wasn't just a deep threat, he was a reliable overall receiver. If he can continue to develop and show that overall abilities, I think he could definitely lock himself up as a third or fourth wide receiver option there for the Eagles, with potential to develop in this throughout the season as Jalen Hurts comes out and tries to establish himself there for the Eagles. So I think you're going to see a lot of action though as he tries to, especially potentially first half action there. Hopefully, if you're playing in the second half, you're probably not making the impression you want to in training camp. So hopefully first half action for John Hightower there. I would definitely tune in, catch some number 82 action there for the Philadelphia Eagles. Washington, we have John Bates, rookie tight end, decided not to come back to Boise State even though he had the option. But tight end number 87, very likely to make the team, but probably not number 1 or 2 tight end, probably number 3. So I think you're going to see some action here for John Bates. But tight ends aren't as used in the throwing game as they are in the NFL, as they are in college for sure. And definitely not just how the Washington has been going along with the difficulties they've been having at the quarterback position, the team position overall. I mean, that team is just a mess. You're probably not going to see a ton of action or a ton of passes going John Bates' way, but so I'm going to rate them number 2 overall, but definitely worth tuning in a little bit there to see what happens, and I think he's definitely going to make the team there and going to probably get some action throughout the season. So excited to see what happens in the regular season for John Bates, but probably not much to watch in the preseason here. Also on the Washington team, we have Charles Leno Jr., offensive tackle, number 72. Of course, after 7 seasons with Chicago, he's getting a chance to kind of rebrand himself here with Washington. Looks to be a starter at left tackle, so you're not going to really see him at all throughout the preseason. Minnesota Vikings, they have Ezra Cleveland at guard for number 72, coming in his second year. Looks to be a solid starter for them, so not going to see him in the preseason. And Alexander Madison, running back number 25. Now, he's a little bit of a different story. Had kind of an off year last year compared to what they thought he could. Yards-wise, he was pretty much at the same number as his rookie season, but he, as far as playing time, his yards mostly came in garbage time, and he didn't really have the same breakaway impact. He was down, according to articles I've read, he was down on the juke ratings. He was down on his breaking tackles, the number of broken tackles. So he didn't quite show the same incredible athletic ability that he did his rookie season. So hopefully third year turnaround, comes back strong, has another great year. But really probably going to see, I think he's definitely on the team. I mean, he's definitely locked up on the team. They have a slot for him. Some sites aren't saying he's the guaranteed second string. I think he pretty much is at this point, but I think you will see probably a little bit more action of Alexander Madison in the preseason, first half action at least, than you would have in past years as he kind of competes. Minnesota Vikings did draft I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his name, but Kene Nwengu from Iowa State. Sorry, any Iowa State fans, if you're watching, I'm really not... Sorry, I'm butchering that name, I'm sure. But they kind of brought him to force a little bit of a running back 2 competition there. I think he probably ends up as a third back, but there might be a little bit more competition here. So potential, I'm going to be rating the Minnesota Vikings number 2 watchability overall, at least in the first half there, as Alexander Madison potentially gets a chance there to show exactly what he's got, and hopefully he comes back just as strong as he did his rookie year, and potentially starts to earn his way. He's not going to beat out Dalvin Cook for a starting position here on this team, but he definitely has a chance to show what he's got to be able to potentially get a chance to transfer elsewhere to be a starting running back, which I think he can be in the NFL. Show what he's got in the preseason, have a great year next year, put up some good stats, and potentially get a chance to go start somewhere else going forward. Okay, Atlanta Falcons. I'm going to be rating them number 1 watchable overall, even though they only have one Boise State player, Avery Williams, cornerback, number 35, rookie, incredible player for Boise State. Obviously, both at the cornerback role and at the special teams position. Number 1 punt returner in the nation last year. 9 returns for touchdowns. 6 of those were punt returns for touchdowns. Likely his main role is going to be on special teams. That's really why he was picked up by the Atlanta Falcons. But I think you're going to see a lot of Avery Williams returning punt returns and kick returns during the preseason here, because that's really where you show what you've got. That's really the preseason for returners. That's really where you kind of earn your way onto the team. So I think you're going to see a lot of exciting returns and playing time on the return end for Avery Williams. And then I think they're also probably going to throw him in there. So that first half is going to be the punt returns for Avery Williams, and the second half they're probably going to throw him in there at cornerback to just see what he can do. I know he's a little bit smaller NFL wise, but it's the second half. A lot of third and fourth string players going out there. So I think you're going to get a lot of Avery Williams action. I'm rating the Atlanta Falcons number 1 watchability overall. And then just keep an eye on, see how things develop, see if I'll update things, see if Durant Miles ends up being on that team. Again, ESPN listing him on as part of the Atlanta Falcons, but the Atlanta Falcons actual team roster doesn't have him on there. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on there, but at least Avery Williams, big watchable target there. So make sure you tune in for those Falcons games. All right, Tampa Bay, they have one Boise State player, John Mulchin, guard at number 75. Second year, uncertain position-wise. He spent a lot of time on the practice squad, but he was elevated for a couple of games there for Tampa Bay. So he has a chance here to make the 53-man roster. The Tampa Bay type sports articles or news sites are giving him a pretty solid shot there to make the 53-man roster as kind of an alternate guard position there. But you're probably not going to see a lot of him out there in the preseason, or if you do, you're probably not going to be able to really see very much of what he's doing because cameras aren't really focused there in the offensive line. So I'm going to be rating Tampa Bay overall as a 3. Not very watchable, but you want to tune in there and see John fight for that roster spot. Definitely do so. All right, moving on, Carolina Panthers. Again, 3 overall, only 1 player, and it's a lineman, Matt Paradis. Great lineman for Boise State in his 7th year here in the NFL. But he's a solid starter. Number 60, where's that number 61? Solid starter. Started all 16 games in 2020. Not going to see him in the preseason at all. Definitely a solid starter there. Okay. All right, so, and at some point here, we transitioned to the NFC. I was at Dallas, so I forgot to mention that. All right, last few players here. We're wrapping up. We're almost there at the end, so don't leave. Just finish off these last 4 players here. Los Angeles Rams, 3 overall. They have 1 player, Dante Dion, cornerback number 21. 4th year, he's really hanging in there. He didn't have any stats in 2020. He was on the practice squad, but he's been hanging in and around the NFL. He's projected as a 5th-string cornerback and potential to make the 53-man roster by most news sites there. So you might see a little bit of action there in the Los Angeles Rams, but he's not going to be playing on special teams. He's just going to be playing there as a cornerback, potentially in preseason. So you might be able to see a little bit there, but he's not a starter, so you're not going to see him in the first half. But I think if you tune into the 4th half, you might see Dante Dion making some plays like he did at Boise State. But 3 overall, just because it's the one position player there, and probably not going to be seeing too much of him overall. Arizona Cardinals, they actually have 3 players in the NFL, so watch out, Cowboys there. Arizona Cardinals coming for the title of team with Boise State players. Of course, they're still down 1. The Arizona Cardinals now have 3 Boise State players on their roster, trying to make that 53-man roster overall. Marcus Henry, offensive lineman, but he's also potentially going to be seeing some snaps at center, according to what some of the sports articles are saying there. He's number 53, 6th year in the NFL, played 1 game for Dallas. So he's been in and out, off practice squads, only has 1 game under his belt after 6 years. So really tough time making the roster here, but they brought him in for a reason, so there's a chance. I think you're going to see a little bit of action there out of him as he competes to try and make that roster spot. A.J. Richardson, wide receiver, number 83, 2nd year in the NFL, both years previously on the practice squads. Chance to make the roster as a 4th or 5th string wide receiver, according to news articles. they're looking like Arizona might carry the 5 wide receivers here, and he has a really good chance to make that 4th or 5th string. So I think you're going to see some plays out of A.J. Richardson in the second quarter, maybe late second half here. So definitely something to tune in for. Also, Tanner Vallejo, inside linebacker number 51. He's in his 5th year. 23 tackles and 1 sack last year is his best year since 2018. So he's really kind of found his footing there in the NFL, according to his own words. Roster spot is pretty likely secure, but you'll probably still see him having a pretty heavy preseason there. So I'm going to be rating the Cardinals number 2 overall, just because I'm not sure how much playing time you're going to be seeing out of these guys or how much they're going to be targeted. But I definitely think A.J. Richardson and Tanner Vallejo are going to have a pretty heavy preseason there. So number 2 overall watchability for Arizona Cardinals. So just to wrap up there, the teams are definitely want to be tuning in every game to see if you see some Boise State alumni action and some exciting position groups in that running back, wide receiver, quarterback kind of area, or just heavy playing time overall. Tennessee Titans, Denver Broncos, Denver Broncos, Atlanta Falcons are going to be your top 3. And then also, I think you're going to get some pretty good action if you tune in for at least the first half of the Dallas Cowboys, and then the Arizona Cardinals, and then also Minnesota Vikings here, first half action at least for Alexander Madison. So that's your teams, that's your wrap up, that's all the Boise State players in the NFL. Of course, this is the only video I'm going to be making for the preseason. I'm not going to do my regular review of Boise State alumni stats in the NFL like I do during the regular season. So make sure you like and subscribe if you want to see other Boise State videos, and if you want to keep in touch, or sorry, not keep in touch, but keep an eye on what Boise State players are doing in the NFL, former Boise State players are doing in the NFL during the season. I'm making weekly videos once the season starts on keeping track of all the stats, overall plays, players of the week, just kind of taking a look at what Boise State alumni are doing in the NFL. Should be an exciting year. Hopefully all 20 of them make that final roster, and hopefully maybe a couple more get brought in as either the season progresses or the preseason progresses. I might make one more video at the end of preseason, just seeing kind of how all the players did overall before the 53-man rosters are announced. Make a final prediction. We'll see. But for sure, make sure you hit that like and subscribe, and make sure to join Bronco Nation Updates on Facebook, the largest Boise State group with over 8,500 members. All right, thank you for watching this video, and as always, go Big Blue!